You're watching the Run For It YouTube channel. In case you don't know me from previous episodes, I'm Finlay, the Training and Development Manager for Run For It. So for this episode, we're going to be doing a review of two of the most popular road running shoes out there at the moment, the HOKA Bondi 8 and the HOKA Clifton 9. We get asked all the time, which one's better, the Clifton or the Bondi, what's going to suit my foot shape as well. So we're not just going to be covering the cushioning, we're going to be going through how they fit, the durability, so you're going to get a really good idea of which one of these HOKA running shoes will actually be better for you. Now, I've run about 160 kilometers in these Cliftons. I've only run about 50 kilometers in the Bondis here, but I've got a really good feel for what these are like, so I'm going to be able to compare really accurately how they feel, what they're like in terms of the fit, and go through all of those in this review. Now let's start with the cushioning, because that's what everyone asks with the Clifton and the Bondi. Which one feels better? Which one feels more cushioned? Now, they actually both feature really similar foam. They both feature one of HOKA's EVAs, but you can see from the midsoles here how they definitely look a little bit different. The Bondi has a much thicker midsole. You can see that thickness to the stack height, and you can also see how it has these lines running through the midsole, and this is what HOKA call a billowed effect, and it's designed to improve how the midsole compresses and then how much energy you get back from that midsole too. How does that feel on a run then? Well, there's no doubt about it. The Clifton feels really nice and protective under your feet. It offers great padding, feels really cushioned, but the Bondi is a level up in terms of cushioning and protection. The extra millimeters of foam, particularly in the forefoot, just do feel a lot more padded, a lot more comfortable under your feet, and I personally just find the Bondi a lot more cushioned than how the Clifton feels. Where the Clifton does have the Bondi though is on the weight. We'll come back to this point a little bit later on another area, but the Clifton midsole is definitely lighter, and the benefit of that is that it feels a little bit more responsive, and I find that it just adapts a little bit better to changes in pace. So if you do pick up the pace, you maybe start running a little bit steadier, or even do a few strides in your run, that Clifton midsole definitely feels a little bit more adaptive and responds better to that change in pace. Now, one of the things I love the most about HOKA running shoes is the rocker technology. The curved midsole design is absolutely incredible at taking the stress off your lower leg muscles. I've talked about this before in a previous episode on a Clifton running shoe review, and why it's so good is when you land, the rocker technology rolls your feet forward and just takes so much stress off your lower leg area, and both of these really excel on that front. They both feel like they're rolling your feet forward. It's incredibly smooth to run in. The only point of difference really is that I found the Bondi slightly smoother. I found the transition from heel to toe off a little bit more fluid in the Bondi than I did in the Clifton, but I could totally see how somebody else landing in a slightly different way might find the Clifton rocker works a little bit better for them. So it's really hard to say that one's better than the other on that front. From a support perspective then, they're both neutral running shoes, but they're both supportive neutral running shoes, and that's because the walls of the cushioning wrap up round the side. So rather than your feet sitting on top of the cushioning, they sit into the cushioning, and that just creates a little bit of holistic support which keeps your feet in check. The Bondi base is wider than the Clifton, so that does create a little bit more stability. I certainly found that the Bondi just does feel that little bit more stable under your feet. The midsole walls also wrap up slightly higher on the Bondi, so again, you just have a little bit more support around the side of your feet, and I found that particularly beneficial getting towards the end of a run when you're just starting to fatigue, get a little bit tired. That gives you that little bit of extra stability and comfort when you really need it. When it comes to the upper of the Bondi versus the Clifton, there are actually some reasonable points of difference, but the only thing I would say before we go into the detail is that I can easily transition from one to the other. So if you are the type of runner who likes to rotate between the shoes and you're looking for that element of consistency in the fit, then you definitely get that from the Bondi and the Clifton, and you'll be able to pick the same size in both shoes. So what are those differences? Well, the first one is really that the Bondi is built with more accommodating fit, particularly in the toe box. It's actually one of HOKA's broadest lasts in the Bondi. So that does mean that it feels more spacious at the front of the shoe. And if you have a slightly wider foot, then you may prefer the fit of the Bondi. I'd say if you have a slightly narrower foot, then you actually may prefer the fit of the Clifton because it does just fit slightly more snugly around the toe box. But as I said, I was able to transition between the two, and even though there's a difference there, it's pretty marginal. The other key difference is the weight of the uppers. The Clifton is definitely lighter, more streamlined than the Bondi. In the Bondi, you have more cushioning that goes around the heel collar. You have a more padded tongue as well, and you have a more premium mesh upper. So it's a bit like how the midsole feels. In the Bondi, you've just got a little bit more padding, a little bit more comfort, and a little bit of a plusher feel in the upper. So it depends what you like. If you like that ultra lightweight feel and you like it to be stripped back, the Clifton still has lots of padding, but it does give you that kind of more breathable sensation on the feet. Now on to the elephant in the room, because what you read on a lot of reviews or hear about is the fact that the Clifton is a lot lighter than the Bondi. Now, if you look at the outsoles here, you're going to see why that's the case. Well, there's a little bit less cushioning in the Clifton and a lighter upper, which takes a bit of the weight down. The big difference is how much outsole rubber is on the two shoes. You can see on the Bondi all this orange material here, that's outsole rubber. On the Clifton, while there's a lot more outsole rubber on this than there has been on previous versions, you can see a lot more of the exposed cushioning, and you can start to see how that EVA is wearing in the midsole. Now, this outsole rubber is the heaviest part of the running shoe. It adds the most weight to them. So the Bondi, because it has more outsole rubber in it, it's simply going to last longer than a Clifton, and that's where the difference in weight comes from. So unfortunately, it's not always possible to make a shoe lighter and make it more durable, and there's always going to be a little bit of a trade-off there. So just wanted to cover that that's the key difference in the weight in between the Bondi and the Clifton, and the fact that you just need to expect a little less durability from the Clifton than you'll get with the Bondi. How do you pick between them then? Well, the Bondi is the ultimate cruiser. In my opinion, it is just amazing for recovery runs and for long distance sessions when you're just going out and you're trying to bank as many miles as possible. It's not the softest feeling running shoe out there, but it is ultra protective, ultra padded, and you feel like you've got so much cushioning under your feet. And when I get to an hour and a half up to that 2 hour mark in a long run and I'm in the Clifton, I do find myself wanting that little bit more padding, particularly in the forefoot. And that's where the Bondi really comes into its own. I would be very surprised if anyone found that the Clifton was actually much more comfortable than the Bondi when you're really trying to bank those longer miles. So I use the Clifton for my slower to steady pace runs when I feel a little bit fresher. And what I mean by that is if I've done a harder day's training like a tempo run or some interval runs, my legs are going to be pretty tired the next day and I'm going to be planning a recovery run. And that's where the extra cushioning in the Bondi will take a little bit more stress off my legs and help improve that recovery rate. But when I'm doing those aerobic days that follow an easier day, that's when actually having something that's lighter, a little bit more responsive, a little bit more lively actually feels better to run in. And that's really where the Clifton is, a better shoe on those days than the Bondi, because it just feels a little bit more enjoyable to run in. And if you throw some pickups into those kind of runs, a few strides at the end, it does feels better and responds better to that injection of pace. So, the Clifton is just an amazing everyday all-round running shoe that's perfect for banking those aerobic miles. So there's definitely benefits from wearing different running shoes for different runs, and that's where the Bondi really is the best option out of the two for those recovery days, those really easy miles, and then taking the stress off your legs on the long, slow runs. Whereas the Clifton's probably a better everyday training shoe because it's just a bit more versatile and it responds to a greater range of paces. If you're going to pick between the two and you're going to choose one, I'd think firstly about how long you'd like your shoes to last and if you want more durability, because if that's your top priority, then it's pretty simple. You're going to want to pick the Bondi because these are going to last longer with the extra cushioning, the extra padding around the heel collar, and most importantly, the extra outsole rubber. But then you can come on to what your training looks like for the week, because while a lot of people mix up their training, a lot of people don't. If your training is all at a consistent pace, I would think about, would you like the lighter Clifton that does give you a little bit more flexibility if you do decide to change your pace up? Or do you want the softer feeling Bondi that's going to feel that more padded and plusher sensation under your feet, and you're almost not going to even feel the ground in them? Hopefully that really helps kind of separate what they're best suited to and how you can pick between the Bondi and the Clifton for your running. That brings me to the end of this HOKA Bondi 8 versus Clifton 9 running shoe review. Thank you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked it, please make sure and hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. You can also head to the Run For It journal where you can read about this review and see pictures of how the two shoes stack up against each other. We'll see you next time.